President and CEO of Integra Resources, here to talk to you once again about some great drill results from the Delamar Gold and Silver Project. As you all know, we've been drilling and doing a lot of drilling, as a matter of fact, on the Delamar Project since December of last year. And we feel that the results are really starting to bear fruit in what could be some significant resource additions and potentially some significant mine life additions to the Delamar Gold and Silver Project. And so I'll be diving into that through the course of the presentation. It's been a while, as a matter of fact, since I've given you all an update on the project, so I think it's high time that I did so, and just take you through a bit of what's going on in the project, both from a corporate perspective with the Millennial Precious merger that we announced a couple weeks ago, and in addition to that, some of the great work that's being conducted on the ground, both in Idaho and the lead up to some great work to be announced in the context of the Millennial Precious assets in Nevada. Boy, that's a mouthful. On to the cautionary note. Have a look at this disclaimer, read through it, and then we can talk further about this great friendly merger that we announced a couple weeks ago. And so why did we do this? We did it in an effort to grow bigger, in an effort to gain some scale that we believed is really needed in this industry right now, in an effort to create a bigger company with a much larger resource endowment. You know, no longer a one asset company, but a 2 and 3 asset company focused squarely on heap leachable resources in the Great Basin. That was the key to this groundbreaking transaction that we announced. Well supported, well financed from the institutions around the world and from Wheaton Precious Metals, who are backing the company in a pretty significant way. So what we have is now a company that tips the scales at about 6 million ounces of total resources, probably going to 7 million ounces at some stage during the course of this year's announcements to come, with the resource estimates that we have both from the Idaho side and from the Nevada side coming from the Millennial Precious assets. We're really sort of focusing squarely on building heap leach assets, and what this transaction does for us, it gives us a successive pipeline of projects in the Great Basin that, when fully up and running and producing, will be producing well over 200,000 ounces of gold equivalent per annum. And in our view, that's quite scarce. There's not many of these types of company setups out there. This is a team that's going to work very well together because we've known each other for years. This is a team that have complementary skills, be it from an exploration, permitting, construction, project finance, or capital markets perspective. A lot of talent on both sides that will complement each other. We've done this sort of thing before. So in our mind, there's really not much else out there like this. And it's a great setup for what we believe will be a great year for the combined company. So back to kind of the view of what's going on down in southwestern Idaho at the Delamar Project, just southwest of Boise. Many of you would have watched these webinars before, these videos before. This is our large land position in southwestern Idaho. On the left-hand side, you see the Delamar total resource. On the right-hand side, separated by about 7 kilometers of total distance, is Florida Mountain. And those two projects together on a total resource base account for, roughly speaking, close to 5 million ounces of total gold equivalent resources in the ground, undeveloped. This is a past producing mining district, which I'll touch on a bit later on in the context of why we think the stockpile material is quite exciting. But what you see in the form of these red blocks are those resources that are oxide and transitional mineralization that were the focus of the PFS that we put out, roughly speaking, about this time last year. From a total resource perspective, we have close to 2 million ounces of total oxide and transitional material on a fully recovered basis. Per the development plan that we put out last year, we're looking at recovering about 1 million ounces of gold equivalent on this project between these two deposits. And, you know, deposits like this are pretty rare in the context of the Great Basin. There's not many oxide heap leach projects out there that can sustain sort of 130, 140,000 ounces a year. And Delamar is one of them. And we've advanced and de-risked this project sufficiently. We're now moving into a key permitting stage on these projects. More on that a bit later. Diving back into that 60 million tons of stockpile, which have been the focus of a lot of our attention on site over the past 4 months. So I showed you earlier on where those in situ resources are. Those red piles that you see there, those are those key stockpiles, those stockpiles of gold and silver, gold equivalent mineralization, oxidized and transitional material that has been mined previously by Kinross when they were in production over the course of a 20-year time span, not too far back in time. Now, just to remind you of the premise of that material and why it's so important in the context of future heap leaching. So Kinross were mining and processing material on site. They were processing through a mill. And that mill cutoff had an average, had a mill cutoff grade of about 0.85 grams per ton gold equivalent, which means that all that material that resided below that 0.86 or 0.85 cutoff to the mill, but above 0.2 grams per ton gold equivalent, Kinross had a hunch. They knew that someday somebody would come along and want to process this material because there was a lot of it. So they put it to one side, or they used it as backfill material in some of the open pits. And so our job over the course of the last 4 or 5 months has been to quantify and qualify this material, establish really what the average grade of this material is, establish what the potential gold equivalent recovery criteria would be in the context of a heap leach when added to the 2 million ounces of in situ material that we plan to mine. And so we think that's going to do some pretty exciting things. But just as a starting point, we did some volumetric calculations on this red stockpiled and backfilled material, and we concluded that there was about 60 million tons of this material. And doing a back calculation of looking at the Kinross mining records in terms of what they segregated versus what they put through the mill, we concluded on a sort of rough basis that this material probably sits in a grade range of about 0.4 to 0.6 grams per ton. And for any of you who know or have invested in heap leach projects in the Great Basin, you'll know that oxide and transitional material in that grade range, 0.4 to 0.6, it's pretty scarce. It's pretty rare. Not too many mining operations have that sort of resource endowment to begin with. We believe that we have sort of something that looks like, roughly speaking, on a recovered basis, 400,000 or 500,000 ounces just in this previously mined material, mined but not processed material that we've been drilling happily over the last 3-4 months here. So just kind of jumping to the sort of the proof of concept. Some of the results that we put out over the last couple of months have been pretty spectacular. Here's the first round of drill results that we put out in January. And, zooming in on some of these grades, you can see sort of thicknesses of 50 to maybe 100 meters, up to a maximum in a grade range of 0.4 to 0.6. Again, we're starting at this point in January to get results back that are proving this thesis, that there's potentially 1 million ounces of previously mined but not processed material that's going to be moved anyway in the context of future mining. But what would it look like if we took this material and moved it to the heap leach instead of segregated it as waste? And so we're starting to conclude already by this point in January that there's a significant amount of gold and silver in these stockpiles. And then moving on into the last news release that we put out in the March timeframe, early March, I believe it was during PDAC sometime. Again, proof of concept, 30, 40, 50, up to 75 meters, thicknesses up to 100 meters in some cases, in a rough grade range going 0.4 to 0.6 grams per ton gold equivalent, with some pretty significant preliminary gold cyanide shake recovery data generated from this material. So not only are we getting, by this point, early March, let's just call it, a view that there's a significant amount of this previously mined material that has not been processed previously, but that potentially does recover actually quite well in the context of future heap leaching. So roll the clock forward to where we're at today with some of the results that we put out, and here's a view of where some of those sit. And again, we've done a lot of drilling, but I'm just going to go through some of the results that we published this morning. 0.74 grams per ton gold equivalent over 76 meters. That's a really solid hit. It doesn't matter whether it's in situ or already mined in the context of a stockpile. That's a significant hit of gold equivalent over a 76 meter thickness. Another intercept, 0.49 grams per ton gold equivalent over 53 meters. And at Florida Mountain, 0.57 grams per ton over a 50 meter run. Again, some pretty significant widths and grades that when you're talking about potentially oxide heap leachable, recoverable gold and silver could be pretty important. In fact, we've got a very high conviction level to the extent that we probably, with the drilling that we've done thus far, probably added another 2-3 years of mine life to the existing 8-year mine life that was the focus of the PFS study. So more on that to come. We've got more results to put out to the market over the course of the next couple of months. Those results will be coming in pretty quickly now. Our drilling plan cutoff is probably going to be sometime mid-April. So by that point, we'll have enough data to put together a global revised resource estimate that will include this stockpile material for Florida Mountain and DeLamar. The aiming point or the target for that is sometime in June. And that June timeframe is going to be pretty interesting for us as a company. Just going back to the Millennial Precious merger for a sec, that's also when the MPM assets plan to be delivered to the market in the context of a revised resource update, and at the very first maiden economic PEA study on those two projects south of our border in Nevada. So June timeframe is going to be pretty interesting from our perspective. Lots of value to add. Really, this is when things will start to come together, really pointing to, an extended mine life at DeLamar, and then an additional 2 other projects to be developed that, when all 3 are fully up and running, will be producing in the 200 to 250,000 ounce a year mark, subject to further studies. So lots of really exciting things on the go on the project right now. And then just kind of finishing off here, and just to give credit to the entire team. Boy, I got to tell you, this winter has been a tough one from execution on the ground. We had record amounts of snow. We had some inclement weather on site that made things tough for us, not just from an exploration drilling perspective, but also everything else that's going on with respect to advancing this project and de-risking it. As you all know, our plan is to put out this mining plan of operations, which is this document of, I'm going to call it biblical proportions, which is going to spell out the exact criteria that we're going to use to develop, operate, and remediate this project now and forevermore on the project. And this document has really been sort of will be the culmination of 3 to 4 years worth of work. 8 full field seasons of study data goes into this report. Lots of engineering data, and this is where I'm getting at right now. In addition to the exploration drilling, we've been doing a lot of geotechnical drilling. We've been doing a lot of condemnation drilling on site, and all of that data is going to be fed into the mining plan of operations later this year. And so this is what the sort of the 2023 timeline looks like. On the left-hand side, as I mentioned, resource estimate both for DeLamar and for the MPM projects south of the border, and then mining plan of operations to be delivered sometime in Q4 of this year. And as we progress with all of these great studies, we're not going to stop drilling. Our plans are to continue drilling, really testing the upside potential both at DeLamar and, as importantly now, on the MPM projects, both Wildcat and Mountain View. So we'll be returning to getting that drill steel into the rock to deliver exploration results and pointing to tremendous upside in both projects over the course of the summer, thus hopefully avoiding the dreaded Lassonde curve as we head into permitting. And so we're really excited about what we have to deliver this year. Lots of work on the ground. A real strong shout out to the entire team who had to work through some pretty difficult conditions over the course of this past winter. But I feel that that's bearing fruit, and hats off to you all for helping us out on that end. I look forward to talking to you about more results to come, perhaps in the next 3-4 weeks. Thank you all for listening. Have a good day.